Hello, welcome to the channel. Today we'll be discussing subtask in an agile sprint. What is a subtask? Subtasks are really user stories that are broken into smaller tasks. These are typically planned and adapted in a sprint planning and sprint refinement session. They're really like a recipe for a cake, which would be the user story in our case. And these should be done as close as possible to the time of the sprint. So with that, let me try and get into more details about what is a subtask. So first of all, the question is, what are the different types of subtasks that can happen? The first is there could be a subtask to capture, detailed requirements for the user story. Secondly, which is usually one of the more critical subtasks, is around the development task, right? This is where you will assign a subtask to the developer. And very occasionally, the developer is also the person who owns the user story, as in the user story, the primary, uh, in Jira is the developer. And that's the same person who might be doing the development. The next subtask that we'll see very commonly is peer testing. So usually Agile, there's a concept known as paired programming. Again, I'll get into that discussion some point in the future. But for today, we'll just mention peer testing. So usually there's a second developer who is working with our primary developer, and this person is also known as the peer. And usually the peer will be involved in a couple of things like code review as well as peer testing. So this task is for that. The next subtask would be around user acceptability testing. So there might be a business user, whether it's a product manager or somebody else, who might be designated to review and understand the different development pieces here and approve that test. Other testing that might happen, including QA testing, of course, as well as potentially other pieces like performance or SIT testing. But it depends on what you want to consider in the subtask for an agile sprint here. The next one will be some documentation around these API changes, or you might be making, sometimes they call it service inventory, depending if it's a service change. So there's different subtasks that can happen around documentation. And then finally, there can be custom subtasks, right? So depending on what environment you're operating in, what service, what development, there could be custom subtasks that are defined for that story. So now that we've seen what type of subtask can be defined for a user story, let's see how do we get these subtasks done. The first and foremost piece of that is, assignments. Like I said to you, like when I was talking about the development subtask, right? So it's usually assigned to the primary developer. So similarly, we have to focus on assigning these subtasks to the right individuals and making sure they are appropriate for that task. The next thing is we want to review progress on these in the daily stand-ups. So while folks will be coming to your stand-up every day and reporting on what they did yesterday, what they'll do today, and if there are any impediments, we should give attention to subtask as well. The next thing is subtask, just like a user story, they can be blocked with some impediments, right? So ultimately, to remove an impediment on a story, you have to remove or handle impediments for a subtask. So yes, this is an important piece of getting the subtask done. Important point is you don't want to make these subtasks in like sequence order. You want to get them done in parallel as much as you can. Document testing subtasks, different types of testing subtasks, right? All of these can be done in parallel, and that's the whole idea of Agile. So you want to have the team work in parallel. If a subtask is not getting done, then we need to take a step back and focus on that as a team, because if you don't get a subtask done, your story is not getting done. So we have to take a point in time and stop there if you're having some issues with the subtask. Next is, this is, an activity that usually the Scrum Master will own, or the person who's assigned the subtask, that they need to timely go through that effort of getting and marking their stories, or not stories, but the subtasks done, because the collection of all these subtasks is what will permit us to mark a story to be done. And once the story is done, only then do we get that velocity as complete. So it's very important that we get these subtasks done timely and marked accordingly as well. Like I said to you, stories are not done till you get the subtasks done. So this is a very important activity. Sometimes you might identify that, hey, you captured most of the subtasks, but you missed out one. So that's fair. As long as the story is open, you can always go in and add a subtask and get that assigned and closed out as needed. So that's definitely an option. Sometimes you might feel the need to reopen a subtask because some feedback came through, whether it was a testing issue, requirements issue, whatever, right? And a subtask might to be reopened, and that's fine. Uh, but of course, you have to make sure that the story is open at that point as well. In case the story is not open, reopen the story as well, reopen the subtask, get it addressed, and again go through that cycle of getting them done. So with that, I wanted to thank you all for joining today again. The next video in our sequence on Agile will be around testing. So with that, I would again like to thank you all for joining, and looking forward to you joining us next time.